friends, as promised with you, today we will take start with George Eliot and her masterpiece, The Mill on the Floss. This novel includes Eliot's syllabus. But before we come to discuss and unravel the conflicts and aspects hidden in this novel, our today's lecture is about the art of George Eliot as a novelist. Let me tell you that when you come across a new novel during your course of studies or a new novelist, you have to keep in mind four things. These four things are very much necessary when you come across a new novelist, a new dramatist, or any new writer belonging to any genre of literature. Right? As I said, you will have to focus on 4 points. The first is the style of that particular novelist or a dramatist or a poet, short story writer, or a prose writer. The second is in a novel or in a drama, not in poetry or in prose or in any other thing. The second important thing is his or her art of characterization. How does the writer develop his or her characters? This is what we call his or her particular art of delineation of his or her characters. This is the second main thing to start with a literary work. The third thing is the theme or the themes. The theme may be one and the themes may be many in a piece of art. Right? The theme is very important. And 4 is the technique of plot. The technique of plot. Now, let me explain it to you that the readers are of 2 types. One type of reader is the general public, who have nothing to do with the techniques of literature. They read novels or watch dramas just for the sake of fun, just for the sake of enjoyment. Like you have seen that most of the women at our homes watch televised dramas on TV. Televised dramas means the dramas that are presented on television. Now they are not technical women, right? They simply focus on the story. They are not concerned with the techniques being used by the dramatist, by the directors, by the actors, and acting, and the music that is involved in a particular scene. They are not concerned with that. The second type of readers or audience, or like me, like you, who are the students of literature. I am a senior student of literature. You are the junior students of literature. Right? So we see or read a novel or a drama with a serious angle, with a technical angle. We observe the style of a particular novelist or a dramatist. We observe the art of characterization, and then we compare this art of characterization and style and its theme and its plot with the previous novels or dramas that we have read or watched on television or on stage, to make a comparative study, to understand which writer is maturer than which one. Right? Some good day I plan to deliver a lecture on the technical difference between a drama and a novel. The technical difference. Here lies the difference, because for a common man, both tell a story. For a common people, general people who have nothing to do with the art of novel and drama, they are concerned with story. They don't know how the techniques of novel and drama vary from each other. How a drama can be novelized, means can be made novel, and how a novel can be dramatized, how a novel can be made a drama. If somebody gives you this novel and asks you to present it as a drama on television, what changes would you bring about in the technique of this novel to make it a drama and dramatize it and present it on television? Someday we will discuss it if we find time. So far as the style, today our lecture will be confined, since the time is short, and we will have to conclude the things in round about 40 minutes. So I'll confine myself for today's lecture. I'll confine myself simply to the style and art of characterization of George Eliot. George Eliot, as you know, is a Victorian novelist, and she is regarded as the later Victorian novelist. Her period of writing is before Hardy. The last novel that we discussed in your class, Hardy's Tess of the D'Urbervilles, which I told you was published in 1891. This novel, The Mill on the Floss, was published in 1860, 1860, almost 31 years prior to the publication of Tess of the D'Urbervilles. So definitely every writer must be seen in the particular milieu in which she or he is living and the society he or she depicts. Like Fielding, Jane Austen, Dickens, Thackeray, Mrs. Gaskell, Mrs. Elizabeth Gaskell, George Eliot too is a realist. But where lies the difference? If all are realists and she too is a realist, it means there is no difference perhaps. The case is not so. There is a hell of difference between the realism of all these writers and the realism presented in the Mill on the Floss and Adam Bede and in the Middlemarch, the greatest of in Silas Marner, the greatest of George Eliot's novels. Realism is a term that we use that the story or the plot is not real, but it looks like real. Every writer concocts his or her plots. He doesn't take, particularly in novel, that's why it is called fiction. That's why it is called fiction. The events and the characters and the locale and the society is fictitious. That is why we call that this particular writer has subjected his or her novels to realism. Realism is not reality. Realism looks like reality. Realism is closer to reality. Reality is that I am a teacher of English and you are the students of English, and today we are sitting here and we are discussing the thing. This is reality. But in a novel or in a drama, if a character of a professor or if a character of a student of BS English is depicted, he or she may be given all the traits of the teacher of English literature and the students of English literature. The events are not, you might have seen written on television screen as disclaimer that the events and the characters are fictitious. Any coincidence with the names of the characters with some person may be simply a chance. The writer does have no intention to televise or to write about the life of some particular individual. This disclaimer is shown on the televised screen. It means drama or novels, and particularly the novels, are based upon fictitious incidents and fictitious characters, but they look like reality because we all live in a society and we want to understand human beings like ourselves. That's why we, the readers, be it general public or be they the students of literature, they love to understand the people like them. You understand my problems, I understand yours. I understand yours better than you understand mine, because you have never ever become a teacher. I have once been a student like you, so I can understand your problems better than you understand mine. Keep it in mind. You don't properly understand the problems of mine, but you can understand the problem of a father. Since
You have your own fathers in your homes, and teacher is also a spiritual father. So being a father, you can understand my problems. This is what we call realism. All the writers from
the inception of novel, proper novel, starting from, say, Richardson, and then Fielding, and then Jane Austen, the bigger names I'm taking, and Charles Dickens and Thackeray and Mrs. Elizabeth Gaskell, coming down to George Eliot. They were concerned with broader realism. They have been depicting the societies in which they live. George Eliot goes one step forward and starts making mental dissection of her characters. Starts making soul dissection of her characters. If these terms are a bit difficult for you, I, for your ease and better understanding, divide realism into two branches. One is called external realism and the other is called internal.
Yes, sir.
External realism
And internal realism. The writers I named before you was great in themselves because they, for the first time, discussed the issues of human beings living in their own societies. In, for example, Chaucer's day, when the literature was started, or even before Chaucer, William Ragland and John Gower and people like that, they used to write romances. Their characters were not human beings. Their characters were jinns and giants and fairies and cyclopses, and they have nothing to do with human characters. Due to which we cannot understand them. Because as I said, you understand me and I understand you. As we are made up of flesh and blood, we have the same desires, we have the same aims, we have the same, say, qualities, somewhat different from each other. But this sameness of desires and demands and aims make us all one. From Chaucer down to the Victorian novelists, they started a wave of realism. But what George Eliot did, that she stopped to some extent, she stopped only showing
external realism, and she starts internal realism as well. She starts the dissection of minds of her characters. She starts the dissection of souls of her characters. This is for the first time. Though you may find glimpses of this psychological analysis in some writers whom I have just described, but on a bigger note, George Eliot was the first novelist. That's why she is openly called as the first modern novelist. Because in modern days, psychology is the biggest subject. Why psychology has gained so much importance in modern days, and by the way, when we talk of modern era, it starts from the 20th century. And mind you that she published this novel, The Mill on the Floss, in 1860. It means George Eliot was the first novelist who anticipated the modern era. And this anticipation is the hallmark of every great writer and every great man. Iqbal also anticipates. Many writers anticipate what will happen in future. She anticipated in 1860 that external realism has already been written. Why shouldn't she write on the internal thinking of the writers of her novels? You get my point? You will testify that external realism is associated with our doings, with our actions that we used to perform or that we still perform with our body, with our hands, with our legs, with all the parts of body. Whatever we do in society, which everybody can see, is called external realism. Internal realism is what we think, which nobody can see. You are thinking. Some students keep thinking while they are sitting in the class. They are physically present in the classroom, but mentally they are perhaps playing in some playground, or they are in their homes, or they are watching a movie. So mentally, sometimes, not all the students, but sometimes in junior classes, I have observed that, oh, mister, where are you? What are you doing? What are you thinking? And he says, oh, yes, sir. So means he is physically present in the classroom, but mentally he is thinking. We keep thinking all the time. And the greatness of George Eliot is that her events, the events that she depicts in her novels, lead the characters to thinking. One event makes her characters, male or female, and particularly the protagonist, like here Maggie Tulliver and Hattie Sorrell in Adam Eve. They keep thinking. One event gives a process of thinking, starts a process of thinking. Events are associated with the thinking process that George Eliot has done. Right? This internal realism or internal realism is my personal phrase. Normally they are called psychoanalysis or soul dissection or say mental dissection. George Eliot does in her novels with her characters what Robert Browning does with her characters in poetry. If you study Robert Browning, perhaps you have gone through, he too is a Victorian poet. He also made a psychological analysis of his characters. The soul dissection of his characters. What is the upheaval? What is the revolution that has taken place in the character's mind since, and that soul dissection becomes reliable. Why reliable? Because the writer is the creator of his characters. The writer is believed to be the creator of his characters. The characters are non-existent. Maggie Tulliver had been non-existent if George Eliot had not, if George Eliot wouldn't have created her, right? So when the creator, the novelist, creates a particular character, you must believe that he or she knows what is going on in the mind of every character, as the Lord Creator created us. There should not be that example given with religious point of view, but I'm obliged for the purpose of making you understand, right? As the Lord Creator knows each and every thought coming in our minds. So on this ground, we will have to believe that the writers who make soul dissection and show the readers what's going on in the mind of a particular character, or say at least the protagonist, the central character. And we have to believe, because she is the creator. This technique was later developed and further polished and further accomplished by the writers of stream of consciousness. You will come across those writers.
Yes, sir.
They are the writers of the 20th century, like Virginia Woolf, like William Faulkner, the famous American novelist, like Dorothy Richardson. These writers developed the technique introduced by George Eliot to make it the novel of stream of consciousness, which have fewer incidents and more thinking. So I am not concerned with stream of consciousness novel today. So I'll confine myself to this technique and style of George Eliot. Right?
Yes, sir.
Plus, style also includes, style of any writer also includes, particularly in case of a novel, that some novels are written in third person and some novels are written in first person. Hardy writes his novels in third person, like George Eliot. This novel, The Mill on the Floss, Middlemarch, and Adam Beat, they are written in third person. Whereas some novels of Charles Dickens, you may say contemporary or predecessor of George Eliot, were written in first person, like David Copperfield, like Great Expectation. They are written in first person. I don't know they are included in your course, but I think A Tale of Two Cities, you might have gone through it and it must have been in your course. That novel is written in third person. If you see the technique of a novelist. And I've just thought that Wuthering Heights, written by Emily Bronte. There Emily Bronte takes uses the technique of two narrators. The first narrator who starts the story or the plot was a tenant. I forgot his name. He um, starts the narration in just first three chapters. Then the story is taken to the end by another narrator, Nelly, who was the family servant. So these are the different techniques used by the writers to expose their plot. Once you understand them properly, you cannot be able to understand the real story. Coming back to her art of characterization, her art of characterization. She is like Dickens, like Fielding, like many other novels who depict their characters from the common society. Most of our characters are commoners, the rustic people, the rural people, like Hardy's novels, like Jane Austen's novels, and sometimes you will come across, like you name the character of Arthur Conan Doyle. I think his name was Arthur Conan Doyle. He was a squire, and he appears in George Eliot's novel Adam Bede. But these characters come few and far between in our novels, and they are also, even if they come, they are also depicted not in a favorable light. She also believes in human weaknesses. She doesn't regard human beings like angels. And this too is a part of realism. That we all live in this society, nobody of us can claim to be an angel. We have our own weaknesses, and none has more weaknesses than I have. I must admit. So, we have to admit the society with the elements, with the agents of the society, means human beings, individuals with all their weaknesses. In The Will on the Floss or in George Eliot's other novels, we have to accept Maggie Tulliver, we have to accept Hattie Sorrell in Adam Bede, with all their weaknesses. From weaknesses, we learn. And these weaknesses, with the passage of time, I'll tell, these weaknesses do exist in George Eliot as well. So, this is her art of characterization, that her characters are full of her negatives, her positives. It means the reading of literature must develop an element of tolerance in your mind. How to tolerate the weaknesses of the individuals living with you in society. This society is not an ideal society. We must not look for idealism. If you look for idealism, definitely you will get disappointed and dejected. And finally, you will become depressed. So the main thing is that human beings must tolerate each other. So George Eliot's novels show that the characters have their own weaknesses, plus the characters belong to the common run of the society. They are not, say, big landlords, or they are not, say, industrialists, or because we have never met them. We don't know their problems, they don't know ours. So, this is somewhat about her art of characterization. Then I come to another thing, perhaps the term is new for you, that like some other novelists, like David Copperfield particularly, and like Great Expectation, this novel, The Mill on the Floss, And like Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. She too is a Victorian novelist. Bronte sisters, the one I just referred to, by Emily Bronte, Wuthering Heights, and she wrote only one novel, Wuthering Heights. And like Charlotte Bronte, this novel, The Mill on the Floss, is a Bildungsroman novel. Have you ever heard this term before? The Bildungsroman novel. A Bildungsroman novel is a novel in which the protagonist develops slowly and gradually and learns from his past experiences and finally reaches his or her destination. In every Bildungsroman novel, the central character is shown as a little child. Here, when you will be going through this novel, you will come to know that Maggie Telliver, as the novel starts, and Tom, her brother, they are little kids. And with the passage of time, as the novel progresses, they also grow up. Not only physically, but mentally. It is Bildungsroman novel, in fact, develops the mind and shows you how the mind of a particular character has developed and he has attained what he does not attain at the start of the novel. You go through Wuthering Heights. In Wuthering Heights, Caddy was a young girl, and then she learns a lot. In David Copperfield was a boy. In Great Expectations, Pip was just a boy, and he learns, he develops his mind. And here in The Mill on the Floss, Maggie Tulliver was introduced as a little girl. And with the passage of time, she grows, not only physically, but mentally. Right? This type of novel is called Bildungsroman, Bildungsroman, Bildungsroman novel. Whenever you come across a novel like this in which a little child is shown at the start of the character and through the pages of the novel, through the passing of the years, she learns from his or her experience. And let me tell you, if somebody asks you, who is your favorite teacher? You must say that experience is my best teacher.
Yes, sir.
You learn more from your past experience than anybody else. Experience is the best teacher. So here in Bildungsroman novels, experience teaches the little kids and they develop mentally and finally they achieve their goal. They
Goal.
want to become what they
Or
designed. So today, since the bell has gone and other sir has come on the gate, I stop here and we have discussed two things today about the technique of George Eliot. One is the style and the other thing is her art of characterization. And in style, she has developed English novel as she has taken it from the hands of Charles Dickens, masters like Charles Dickens and A.K. and Jane Austen and Fielding, and she has developed it one step further, like the battle race, and gave it to the modern masters like Virginia Woolf and William Faulkner, where they come to make it completely psychological and adopt a new technique of stream of consciousness. So, soul dissection is the only aspect which makes George Eliot to be called by the great critics as the first modern novelist in the history of English novel or fiction. I thank you very much.